Welcome back to this special edition of Hannity. In the coming week, expect some massive developments out of the Department of Justice's investigation into the investigators from the Inspector General. The long-awaited Horowitz report on FISA abuse any time now. We've been saying that for a while, but it really is right on the precipice of coming out. Plus, the Durham probe into the origins of the Russia witch hunt. Remember, he's the U.S. attorney out of Connecticut. His looking into the witch hunt has reportedly obtained a key piece of evidence, two pieces of evidence actually, in the form of two BlackBerries used supposedly by Joseph Misfud. Now keep in mind, he was the shadowy Maltese professor who infamously told Trump advisor George Papadopoulos about the supposed existence of leaked Clinton emails. According to Comey's FBI, that conversation is what supposedly sparked months-long witch hunt that led to what we are today. There was no evidence of anything that had gone out there. But tonight, there is likely so much more to this story. Joining us now is the author of the big new book. And if you don't have this and you want to know about what's going on, you need to get this book. It is the definitive writing on the witch hunt, the story of the greatest mass delusion in American political history. It is chock full of analysis, but also citations like you've never seen before. And also joining us, Fox News legal analyst, that's from Fox News legal analyst Gregg Jarett. And also joining us right here next to me here in New York, Fox News contributor Emily Compagno. Thank you both for being here tonight. Greg, I want to go to this. You're as familiar with this case as anybody out there. But if it is true that the U.S. attorney now has BlackBerries from Mr. Misfud, where are we going with this?
Well, the spying that occurred on the Trump campaign, initiated by John Brennan's CIA and other intelligence agencies, was outsourced to foreign undercover informants like Stefan Halper and yes, Joseph Massoud. If you read the Mueller report, Mueller would have you believe that Massoud's a Russian asset. He's not. I mean, either that was an intentional misrepresentation by Mueller or he's incredibly gullible and maybe a little of both. Now, Massoud has always been a Western intelligence source, and in fact, he gives instructions to U.S. intelligence agents, including the FBI. So think about this. Our own asset is feeding disinformation to George Papadopoulos on purpose to set him up as a patsy to justify an investigation of Donald Trump. And that never was the trigger for the investigation. That was all just a misdirection. It was initiated because the FBI got their hands on this dossier that was paid for, commissioned by the Hillary Clinton campaign.
Now, Emily, who's joining me here in New York, right by my side here, from a legal perspective, if law enforcement is dealing under a whole different set of rules, right, when you're dealing overseas as opposed within the United States, but to be able to have that BlackBerries and the communications, what gyrations are they going to have to go through to be able to inspect that and be able to decipher what is going in and out of those BlackBerries if this report is true?
Well, even on this, we're running into issues, and this is interesting. Here's what viewers should know about this, that the attorney for General Flynn, she was essentially begging the prosecution to turn it over, right? It's exculpatory evidence, and that is why we have our faith in the justice system, so that you're confident that both sides will turn over all forms of evidence. She instead literally had to file a motion for it so the judge could force them to turn it over. So even, I think that's partly actually why this has taken so long in part, because at every turn there's not that transparency and there's not that level of cooperation that we would hope. Another interesting point too about Durham's probe is that he had a broader subpoena power and a broader personnel power than the Inspector General did.
Right.
And so that's partly why he is able to obtain such a broader breadth of information, and also from people who no longer work for the United States, which was a limiting factor for the Inspector General.
Yes, Mr. Horowitz, the Inspector General of the Department of Justice, who's been conducting the IG probe, is constrained by talking to people just within the Department of Justice. He may get some outside cooperation, but it's easily to set that aside. Durham doesn't have any of these prohibitions. And what Emily was talking about, Greg, is Sidney Powell, who's the attorney for Michael Flynn, General Flynn, has said, hey, there might be some exculpatory information in here. You need to provide that information to us. What else do you know about this?
It's called Brady material after a famous case called Brady. And the Supreme Court has ruled that if you have any exculpatory evidence, you must turn it over to the defense. Well, it appears, and Sidney Powell believes and apparently has evidence, that they didn't follow the law, which means that the case could be dismissed against Michael Flynn, which was always an injustice. This is a guy who was interviewed by 2 FBI agents, including Peter Strzok, who walked out of the interview and said, the guy's not lying, there's no sign of deception. And the FBI actually dropped the case. Then Bob Mueller, in order to conjure out of thin air incriminating information against Donald Trump, decided to prosecute Flynn, a guy who told the truth, prosecuting him for lying. And the only reason Flynn threw the towel in and pled guilty was because unconscionably Mueller and his team of partisans were threatening to prosecute Flynn's son. And Flynn also went broke, had to sell his house, trying to defend himself. This is the kind of thing that should never happen in American justice.
Greg, thank you. Emily, final thoughts here on the classification issues. What seem to be the one thing that's hindering the Horowitz from seeing the light of day is that there's so much classified information in there. And
interagency fighting, exactly. And quick point on actually what Greg just said, too, that the ties of Mifsud to the Western intelligence was an omission in the Mueller report, right? So it shows just how much the devil is in the details and what details did not make it into that report.
Thank you both. There's so much more to come on this. We're going to be talking about it, I'm sure, next week. Coming up, Lawrence Jones has...